Okay, welcome everybody. Just going to let everybody file in here over the next 30 seconds or so, and then we're going to get started. Okay, welcome everyone. You can see everybody filing in here. A lot of familiar names I see in the attendee list. Thanks for joining us live here today. I'm Derek Auger, the Executive Director of Conservatory Canada, and welcome to the Friday webinar. We host these webinars every Friday and have all year long, or almost every Friday, having different panelists and guests along the way. I'll just recap where we've been and where we're heading here for the balance of this academic year in terms of the Friday webinar. Last week I gave a little mock exam primer so that we could get a little more familiar and in touch with doing mock exams with you. And so I'm going to deliver the first of those mock exams 2 weeks from today on Friday, April 22nd. I've pre-recorded a mock exam with a grade 4 classical piano student. And those of you that register for that and those that joined me last week are going to get some materials in advance, including a marking grid, a marking form, so you can mark along with me, and a bunch of other information in that recording last week. If anyone wants that recording from last week still that didn't get it, feel free to email me, give me a shout, and you can have a look at that primer. It'll well equip you for the webinar on the 22nd. Next Friday, Good Friday, we're going to take that week off. So you'll hear from me in 2 weeks when we do that first mock exam. It's going to be really exciting. The student does really, really well. And you're going to get a first-hand glimpse into what goes on in the exam room, how we go about what we do as examiners, and a little bit about how we assess, how we listen, how we mark, and that kind of thing. There'll be also opportunities there for you to ask questions and compare your marks with what we have figured out for that student. The week after that, Friday, April 29th, we're going to have Christopher Norton back. He's going to give us a presentation on the music of his wife, Wendy Norton, or Wendy Edwards Beardall Norton. She has a bunch of music, songs, hymns out there. He wants to give us a review of that. I know a number of you have already registered for that. And then the following Friday, May 6th, we're going to have Eleanor, Cecile, and I believe Olivia Adams is joining us that day as well. Am I right, ladies?
We haven't.
Yeah. We haven't talked. Okay, so we're not sure about that. But anyway, you two are joining us again on May 6th to continue this series that we're in part 2 of, where we're looking at the music by women composers and looking at performance practice and stylistic things, devices, and how to treat them. And so today I understand the two of you are going to talk about different pieces from the classical era, featuring women composers only, and talk about how we get from the harpsichord to the piano during that time frame, as well as ornamentation, dynamics, all sorts of other stylistic things. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to you both. Thanks for joining us here. I know this is going to be very informative. We had a lot of good feedback when you presented on Baroque music a few weeks back, and everyone's looking forward to your thoughts. So Eleanor and Cecile, thanks, and take it away.
Welcome everybody, and Cecile, I think you're going to, there's not an awful lot of material at the elementary level, and one of the reasons, a lot of the material is lost due to fires, lack of interest. It's buried deep in libraries and private collections. But Cecile, you discovered a number of methods, and perhaps this is part of the reason why there was a lack of interest perhaps in lessons?
Well, yeah, like when we started, of course, when we started looking on classical repertoire, we both had the same question. How come there's so little material? For beginners, there's a lot more for intermediary, but we're always looking for classical repertoire for beginners. And when we started looking at the keyboard methods of the 18th century, that gave us some answers. I don't want to spend too much time on this, as we have a lot of interesting things to talk about, but I collected a few fun facts, or as one of my students said, it's not fun facts, it's more horror stories. Anyway, the 18th century saw the beginning, the emergence of piano methods, keyboard methods books. The first one was in 1702, and was Monsieur de Saint-Lambert, the principal of the harpsichord. We know it was the first one because he wrote it himself. He said before it was for other instruments, but the first one for the harpsichord. It's specifically for beginners. he said that childhood is the most appropriate time to start, between 6 and 10 years old. But that's all he says about children. The first red flag for me was when I read a good teacher has his own secret for making the students enjoy learning. After having ardently wished to learn to play the harpsichord, they develop an aversion for it at the third or fourth lesson. And well, you know, it's easy to understand why, knowing how they were teaching. Anyway, that method established a pattern of studies. Theory first, then exercises and pieces. And to show you what they meant by a first piece, he gives a few examples to illustrate, let's say, bar lines or repeat signs or rest. And the first piece he gives at the end is a minuet that goes like that you can see there. So as you can see and hear, it's not exactly a piece we would give a first-year student. It's, I would say, grade level 3. In 1717, now François Couperin wrote The Art of Playing the Harpsichord. That's the first mention I found of teaching children. He says that the proper age to start, it's 6-7 years old, and he sees that as the earliest and ideal age. And that's supported by other methods that say not before 7 years old. He writes, I have taken it for granted that to begin with, children will have to be taught the names of the notes of the keyboards. An interesting thing, he says that during the first lessons given to children, it's better not to advise them to practice in the absence of the teacher who is teaching them. The teacher takes the key of the instrument so that they cannot spoil in one instant all that he has most carefully taught them in 3/4 of an hour. So I thought, oh, okay, so the regular lesson is about 45 minutes, and the teacher is there regularly when the child practices. He had a revolutionary approach because he encouraged playing by imitation without the score, which goes against the general way of teaching at the time. It was a very modern way of thinking. It reminds us of the Suzuki method. He writes, one should not begin teaching the tablature or musical notation to children until after they have a certain number of pieces in their fingers. It is almost impossible for them, while looking at their book, not to let their fingers get out of proper position and not to make contortions with them. And even the agrément, the ornamentations themselves might be spoiled by it. Moreover, the memory improves greatly in learning by heart. So it's the only one I found before the end of the century that says actually, no, the children want to play, so they should go to the piano first and then, learn the theory. After that, it goes very quickly. He talks about fingerings, ornamentations. He gives a few little exercises for forming the hands, and immediately Allemande, 8 preludes. And just to give you an idea of the level, the Allemande is at the level 7, Conservatory Canada. And then in 1749, we have Michel Karet, Les Amusements du Parnasse. It says a short and easy method to learn to play the harpsichord. So you can see that's the beginning of a suite for beginners. And you can see the prelude that's basically scale and chords in C. And then immediately a minuet that would be about, I would say, level 3. So immediately the student starts by, again, it's only theory for a few months. Actually, later on, the method states that this child should not touch the piano, the harpsichord or the piano, before he knows all the principle of music. So Michel Karet, we talk notes, note values, fingering, position, how to sit at the keyboard. They learn their scales in 8 notes. They go very quickly, whole note, half note, quarter note, up to the 16th note. Flats and sharps, exercises, including broken thirds, up and down. And then, only then, they start playing. Another thing, hands together from the start. Some will say, okay, play the right hand alone, the left hand alone, but very quickly it's hands from the start. So basically, they're given the theory. I would say, I was looking at that, I figured out up to level 5 theory before they can sit at the piano. 1761, Kernberger, the Klavierrundung, he says the compiler of the present exercises has the intention to serve the beginners by providing them with a series of keyboard pieces that start with the easiest and proceeds towards the most difficult one. So you can see that's the first minuet. That's very pretty. The next one that I found interesting, I just selected the most important ones. 1789, Jean-François Tapret. The first elements of the harpsichord or piano. That's the first indication of, before that, it was all for harpsichord. 1789, we're talking harpsichord or piano. We're shifting. You can see that the students start with exercises that are not easy. You go 1, 2, 3, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then it's 2, 3, 4, and then 3, 4, 5. So it's really finger exercises to strengthen the fingers. And then very quickly you have double thirds, held notes on the second page. You slip into arpeggios, octaves, and then scales. And then you have a few etudes that would, quarter notes with accompaniment whole notes. And then by the third piece, you're already into 8 notes. And the last one I wanted to show you, 1796, Bernard de Vigerie, L'art de toucher le pianoforte. So again, definitely piano from now on. It's the only one I found that was following François Couprin's ideas, saying that this is wrong, that it's the students shouldn't have to learn all those details of theory for so long, and before they touch the piano, that it's long and painful. And in the end, they literally disgust them of playing the piano. But that way of thinking, of teaching piano, just kept going. And actually, Eleanor and I looked at methods that were written in the 1920s that follow exactly the same pattern. So the last one of the century was written by Pleyel and Dussek in 1797, the method for the forte piano. And again, you can see on the screen, the student starts immediately with both hands, learn the notes in treble clef, bass clef, go very quickly through all the figures, a whole note, half note. By the fourth study into 8 notes, number 6, quarter note, 16th, very quickly. Number 8, you have already syncopations and half notes. And by the number 14, you're into double 6 and double thirds. And you find yourself very quickly at what we call, level 3. So basically, in short, most methods follow the same learning pattern. Prerequisites, you need to be able to read and write. Theory first, up to our equivalent of level 5. Some method I looked at say specifically that the practical study of the piano should not start before this child has spent a whole year learning the principle of music. So a whole year learning theory, note values, intervals, meter, tempo, position at the keyboard, fingering, ornaments. Then at the piano, they start by doing finger exercises, the scales in all major and minor keys, arpeggios, solid and broken chords, double thirds, short studies, ends together before the pieces. So I told one of my students, a teenager who's very committed, who loves the piano, and he looked at me and said, I would never have done that. Never. So that explains, I think, it explained to me how come there's so little beginners, pieces for beginners, because they were not beginners for long. They were given the instructions, okay, those are the notes, this is how you do it. They were given a keyboard, the drawing of a keyboard. And so those are the instructions, have fun. So now let's talk about repertoire.
It's quite amazing that people actually continued to play the piano, that we actually have piano play,
Yeah, but over and in those methods, I find it was so funny because there was always a few places where the author would say how it is the responsibility of the teacher to keep the interest of the student, that it's normal that it will get discouraged or will lose interest. Well, no wonder, we've come a long way from that.
A long way. One of the earlier classical composers that wrote for the harpsichord and or piano was Maria Antonia Walpurgis. She lived from 1724 to 1780. She was the Princess of Bavaria, an Electress of Saxony. She was born in Munich to an archduchess and the Emperor Karl VII. She was well educated from a young age, and her musical studies continued even after she was married. Many of these composers were initially singers or mainly singers. So Walpurgis also frequently sang and played the harpsichord at court. She was also a painter and a writer of poetry. She composed 2 operas, and I'm going to play you the Marcia from Celeste Regina della Amazzoni, which was written in 1765. Now, this particular, I'm going to show you the screen share up here. This particular, let's get both pages. All right, so this is the Marcia from the opera. This is found in the Rosina Elisabeth von Munch Klavierbuch, which came out in 1777. So it's the Rosina Elisabeth von Munch Klavierbuch is a large collection of music by various composers, including some of the Bachs and anonymous composers. We don't know who arranged this particular work or if she arranged it herself. So I'll play it on the piano and then we'll talk a little bit about it. So let's see what this would sound like on the harpsichord.
The difference is, I find it's interesting to hear you on the piano because I find the difference is very interesting. See, it works really well, but the character is different. It's more like army march, you know, you can see the soldiers.
But it's also lighter in character.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, you feel the lightness of the dotted notes, much more so on the harpsichord than on the piano.
Yeah.
The student's perspective, it is. From a student's perspective or from a pedagogical point of view, this is a great piece to teach double thirds because virtually the whole right hand is double thirds. So it's a good technical work for students. All right, then another work was the Bartholomon. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the Bartholomon I find it's similar in spirit. Bartholomon was born into a musical family. Her father was a violinist, her mother was a singer and a well-known composer also. So she was raised to be a musician. Haydn was a family friend and he was quite close to her. He listed her as one of the London musical personalities in his 1792 London notebook. And she dedicated one of her sonatas to him, which is the sonata that we have that's available to us. Apparently she wrote 7 sonatas between 1786 and 1795. They're definitely more for piano than for harpsichord. The dedications indicate clearly that the Bartholomon family was very well known at the musicians belonging to the English elite. She dedicated some pieces to members of the royal family, and her pieces were like many composers of the time, it was sold by subscriptions, and the list of our subscribers was numerous and included members of the royal family, the nobility, leading musicians. Now on Petrucci, you can find, as I mentioned earlier, the Sonata Opus 3, that's more advanced. If I remember well, it's grade 9, grade 10. And that piece, that's called the Capture of the Cape of Good Hope. Now, that's a good example of a very popular genre at the time, the battle sonata, celebrating a military victory. In this case, it's a battle that the British won over the Dutch in Africa. The Dutch had a settlement and a station for the Dutch East India Company in the Cape. So it's definitely programmed music. It's very descriptive in 7 movements. So it tells a story, basically. The march of the army, the bulk of the Dutch and British making a stand. You have a line that's a trumpet call, imitating the trumpet, of course. And then the alarm of the enemy, the diversion on Cape Town side, the surrender of the colony, and the quick march of our troops. That is part of the level 2 repertoire list. And then there's the Allegro Maestoso, the finale, which is at the level 3 level, level 3 repertoire list. And then it ends by a song and chorus, Allegretto. So the quick march of our troops. I should play that on the piano. Really. Okay. It's a really nice piece. It's perfect to talk about the march. The fact that it's a quick march. Usually march are in 4/4. This is in 2 rather than in 4, and it's very much in the high register. So the left hand is in the treble clef, which is unusual for students, and I find it it's clearly an imitation of the soldiers playing the, I don't know if the fife, F-I-F-E. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. And it's in G major, 2 parts of 8 measure. So, talking about the analysis, regular phrases. It has broken chords, solid chords. The melody and the bass is important to bring out, and the battery, the pedal G also makes it really interesting. It's a good piece to talk about thirds, about the handprint, for you have arpeggio, you have scales, and moving your arms. Also staccato touch versus legato touch. And it's, you have the pincé at the beginning. So it's a good, an easy way, I find, to initiate the children to the ornaments in an easy way, because the pincé, to me, is the easiest. And the first note on the beat, and you can start by playing them together, and then you release the bottom one. So it's a good way. I mean, it simplified things. It's often children are very impressed by, they see ornaments and they get nervous. So it's a nice way it's an easy way to show them that, oh no, it's fun and it's easy. The perfect.
Sorry, I'm just thinking this would be a nice alternative.
Yeah.
We play the Bach musette over and over and over, and
yeah.
Has many similar teaching aspects to it as that musette. So when you're tired of teaching the musette, this would be an appropriate change.
And when I teach students, I try to establish concrete links with the pieces for them. So I find a really interesting clip on YouTube. I'm looking for short clips, 2 minutes. It's called the British Grenadier Fife and Drums. And you see the soldiers, you hear the actual fife, so they can see how this is imitating real life. Now, the finale, lots of repeated notes. So you can see how interesting that could be for a child. You get repeated notes, it's the rhythm, rhythmic precision, especially with the repeated notes. So it's a good piece to talk about the right tempo. If it's too fast, it won't work. The notes are going to be difficult to repeat. The pulse has to be clearly in two for the character. You get scale passages where it's finger technique and moving to chords, repeated notes, staccato touch from the arm. You get octaves and chords. I can see with my students, they really enjoy playing chords. And again, perfect cadence. So they get used to recognize where are the cadences in a piece. What are those cadences? Are they perfect? Are they, 5-1, 1-5? And also the forte sound. It's a good piece to work on, to talk to them about quality of sound, about projection, and developing their attention to listening to themselves. So I think this is a very appealing piece, exciting piece to play. There's action there. And then the next one is the Lebron, I think, right?
Yes. So Francesca Lebron was born Francesca Danzi in Mannheim, Germany in 1756, the same year Mozart was born, and actually she died the same year Mozart died. She became a noted 18th century German singer and composer. She came from a large family of musicians. Her brother was Franz Danzi, whose wife was Margaret Danzi, also a composer. And another brother was Johann Baptist, who was a violinist. Her uncle was a composer and a conductor. So besides being a great singer, Francesca was also an accomplished pianist. She married Ludwig Lebrun, an oboe virtuoso and composer, and the two of them toured Italy that summer. They lived in London for a few years, and Francesca appeared at the King's Theatre. So the rondo that I'm going to present to you is actually from the Journal de Clavecin. That was a periodical in France, and it was the first periodical to successfully distribute musical scores to the French public. It was founded in 1762 and continued under different names by different editors. In its first 10 years, it ran as the Journal de Clavecin. The publication initially consisted of harpsichord arrangements of individual opera arios grouped into suites of three or four on a monthly basis. So until the early 1770s, each issue consisted of two suites composed of airs from different operas instead of traditional dance movements. As the forte piano gained popularity, the editor, Clement, ensured that his arrangements remained compatible with both the pianoforte and the harpsichord. From these dances emerged sonata form. So let's have a look at this work here. So this is the rondo. All right. Sorry. And then it returns back to the beginning. What I love about this piece is how you can see the drama that starts with the second ending and going on to the third page. All of a sudden, we switch into G minor and it becomes extremely expressive. So it's a very emotional piece, and you can see how it comes. You can see the transition also from the vocal to the more instrumental style. So much of this is very, very lyrical. From a teaching perspective, we have, again, double thirds, and then we have all these wonderful scale passages and fingering passages to work out. So there's a lot of great pedagogical material in it. And I think students would enjoy it because it's so varied in style. This is, again, this transition going from the harpsichord to the forte piano. So Cecile, what does it sound like on the harpsichord?
Well, I can play that. You will miss the lyrical side of it. To me, like you were saying, this was written and published for both harpsichord and piano. you feel that it was too, it's clearly going more towards the piano. So for a period of time, they were keeping both instruments listed so that they would sell more. And I feel that this one belongs to that category. They kept the harpsichord to sell more, but let's say I could be thrown tomatoes live there. And let's try the slow one. See, that doesn't work at all. I can work all I can to keep the, but this is clearly pianistic. See, you feel that the harpsichord is too happy to play that.
Yeah. What was interesting too, in the middle, the B section with all the 16th notes, you had to move down an octave.
I was going to mention that, yes, because that's another thing. I didn't have enough notes at the top, at the bottom, because the piano was expanding. So this could work to a certain point on a big harpsichord with two manuals. I would have a few more notes in the high register, and I could play this, the left hand on the second manual, so it would be immediately softer. But I would not be able to get the lyrical side of this. The dramatic doesn't come out. It works. It would work on a two manual harpsichord, but it wouldn't have the same character.
Right.
See, we're really moving, changing character in the pieces, changing sounds, changing.
And at the same time, the evolution of the piano was also happening. So, the instrument was being improved, the range was being expanded gradually, the tone quality, everything was being expanded. So you can really see, the emergence of the pianoforte initially as coming forward as an instrument. So then we move really to the sonatas, the emergence of sonata forms. So the early sonatas were written for the enjoyment of non-professional performers that were relatively easy to play and didn't have the demands of heavy ornamentation. In the early 18th century, music was considered to reach perfection when associated with words. By the 1780s in opera, music was no longer the accompaniment to words, but the opposite. So the music started to be the foremost rather than the lyrics. The earliest sonatas were often written for the violin with a harpsichord or pianoforte accompaniment. Gradually, the keyboard instrument gained prominence and the violin began to accompany the harpsichord. So you can actually find sonatas now for the harpsichord with violin accompaniment. Which is kind of strange because you don't think of that in today's terms. The violin is always accompanied by the piano rather than the other way around. So the early sonatas were often one movement works, eventually evolving into two or more movements. So Elisabetta de Gambarini was born in 1730. She was an English composer, a mezzo-soprano, organist, pianist, harpsichordist, orchestral conductor, and painter, and. Obviously a very busy woman. She was the first female composer in Britain to publish a collection of keyboard works. Now, Cecilia, you talked a little earlier about works sold by subscription.
Mhm.
So people would have to subscribe to the publishing companies, that is, pay in advance to receive compositions, much like we subscribe to magazines or newspapers. So they would subscribe for a specific composer. Now, people would also go to that subscription list because it was made public, and they would look to see, who's subscribing? Oh, the king is subscribing to this. Oh, I better get on this list so that my name is associated with these people. So it was, in a way of becoming more upper class, if you like, or being associated with the right type of people. So Gambarini had an impressive 200 subscribers to her music. So the sonata that I'm going to share with you, and let's just get this up on the screen here, is from 6 Lessons for the Harpsichord, Opus One. Now, it's written for 2 voices. So let's have a listen to that on the harpsichord.
That works really well on the harpsichord, I find. It was published in the around 1756, something like that. In the 1750s, in that era, anyway. So you really feel the dance.
It's so much lighter and absolutely more dance-like. It's not
More
so
dance-like, and the ornaments are a lot easier to
they
do
sparkle.
because the touch is so light.
That was something I was going to ask you. Do you find this piece in particular, is it easier to play on the harpsichord than on the piano?
I find it's easier to play on the harpsichord because of the lightness of it. That makes the character of the piece more obvious. You know, on the piano, we play always with, we have more sound, the action is
Heavier.
We play with our weight more to play. So it's not, we have to think about it. We have to think, oh yeah, my touch has to be lighter. My fingers have to go up and down quicker. You know what I mean? Precision of touch. When you sit at the harpsichord, it's as if the harpsichord does it for you because of the touch, because of the sound. It's lighter by nature. So you don't have to think about it the way we have to adjust. You know what comes naturally. The piano is an instrument that sings naturally. So it's that's what comes naturally to us when we sit at the piano. That's why romantic music is so much more natural at the piano. The lyrical side of it is more obvious. This is more a rhythmic instrument. So like I said, you don't have to think about the lightness the way you have to do it. So the attitude towards ornamentation, for example, when you play the harpsichord, and I find that with the students, even if they just try it a few times, suddenly it clicks. They say, oh yeah, it's not a big deal. It's just this, it's just to give an accent, you know? So yeah, you feel that the harpsichord helps you to realize the character, and then you move to the piano and you play it naturally. You know, it's easier to play it lighter and more with a more precise touch.
And that's probably why students often struggle with the Baroque music on the piano.
I think so. It's yeah, I think so. And I find with my students, when they hear a version on the harpsichord, you know, that music works really well on the piano.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds great. It's just that we have to work more to get the sounds and the character, that lightness, that bounciness, you know, that it's harder for us to think dance on the piano than to think song because of the nature of the instrument.
And of course, when you're working on a grand piano with a heavy action, it makes it even more difficult to get that lightness of touch.
Yeah, and you're working on those different pieces from that area. It made me even more realize how the touch of the instruments have something to do with it. Like this, I play this and it falls under the fingers, you know, the way it's written, it's easy to play. I was talking to you about other pieces, you know, as we're shifting from harpsichord to piano, suddenly it's harder to play because it's the position of the hand, the notes don't respond the same way. I have to play it slower than I do it on the piano because the notes don't respond to that writing. So it becomes the opposite. I have to work more on the harpsichord than I do on the piano, as
Right.
opposed to this one where I have to work more on the piano to get it right in terms of character than on the harpsichord.
Let's move on to Anna Bonn. Anna Bonn was born in 1735, just 6 years after Gambarini. She was an Italian composer and performer. She was admitted at the age of 4 to the Ospedale della Pietà in Venice. That was after Vivaldi was there. Then the family moved to the Esterhazy court in Eisenstadt in 1762. Anna dedicated her 6 harpsichord sonatas, Opus 2, to the Princess of Saxe-Weimar. So we're going to do the second movement of the sonata in G, Opus 2, number 2 by Anna. Now, Cecile, why don't you play this on the harpsichord and then I'll play it on the piano. We can talk about the different interpretation.
That's a good idea. Okay.
interpretation on the piano. So two expressive performances, totally different characters.
Totally different, but both very convincing.
What's interesting about this piece is, again, you can see coming out of the Gambarini, which was written for two voices. Now, all of a sudden, we have three voices occasionally. So we start mixing the texture somewhat. And it's the use of chords. So you can see how we're evolving here. And this is only 6 years. She was only born 6 years after Gambarini. Moving forward, we have another composer, Beatrice Matai. She flourished in Florence in 1740 to about 1750. We don't know very much about her. This sonata is going to actually appear in a new publication that One Eye Publications is going to be coming out with. The volume was actually pretty much ready to go, and then I found another sonata. So there's so much incredible music out there by women. It really is astounding, and these women deserve their spot in history. Anyway, let's have a look at this sonata, and this is totally different from what we've been hearing. Let me just pull it up here. Just give me 1 second. There we go. All right. I've condensed this onto one page. Let's just enlarge this a bit. Okay, so this is the Matai. I'm going to enlarge it just a little more. There we go. Okay. So we can see how much we have evolved. We now have Alberti bass, rounded binary form. So it's a totally different character from the other pieces. Cecile, how does
Yes.
it harpsichord?
Well, see, to me, that doesn't work at all. And to me, it's a very, it's very groundbreaking, that piece, because it's supposed to have been written, published in the 1750s, but it's much ahead of its time. It's with the Alberti bass. She must have been at the avant-garde of composers, you know. The Alberti bass doesn't work even on a two-manual harpsichord, where this could be softer. Okay, I won't make you suffer too much, but I'll just play a few bars. Let me do that again. See, even on a two-manual harpsichord, it wouldn't sound too great. This is, and I have to work really hard to play those notes detached to make them sound shorter, softer, lighter. And it's not very successful. I'm sure you can't hear the melody really well. You know, and it gets boring really.
Yeah.
Between me, you know, it's like mechanical. Yeah, it's early piano to me. And so it meant that she had to have access to a clavichord, a forte piano among the first ones. So she must. I hope we'll find more information about her. She must have had a lot of money and be in very much in the elite, the musical elite of Florence, have access to the latest instruments and known the latest trends in.
And yet, to find any biographical information about it, we're going to come back to her a little later because it comes into some of the challenges of transcribing this music. Anyway, let's move on to Nationalist Dances.
Yeah, and I'll start. There's two composers I would like to talk to you about. The first one is Maria Simanovska, who was born the year of the French Revolution, 1789, and died in 1831. She was a Polish composer, and she was one of the first professional virtuoso pianists of the 19th century. One of the first to perform from memory in public, before even, way before Clara Schumann and Franz Liszt, who are usually credited for having done that first. She was touring extensively throughout Europe and finally settled permanently in St. Petersburg. She was the court pianist for the Empress Alexandra Fyodorovna. She composed for the court, she gave concerts, she kept giving concerts. She was teaching and she ran a very influential salon, helping lots of people, people who were immigrating from Poland to Russia, notably. We think at this point we have about 100 compositions, largely solo piano works, many miniatures. She wrote a few songs, a few chamber music works. She was the first Polish composer to write concert etudes and nocturnes. And her style influenced Chopin greatly. They knew each other. There was a connection through Chopin's teacher in Poland, who was a friend of Simanovska's family. Anyway, we know that Chopin went to many of her concerts and met her. And he knew her pieces and they strongly influenced him. And also her career as both pianist and composer kind of foreshadows Chopin's as well. and the trend, that we see later in the 19th century, the virtuoso pianist who's also a composer, like Liszt. And one feeding the other one, the work, the talent as a performer, pianist, feeding the compositions, and the compositions feeding, of course, the repertoire of the pianist. She was, it says that her keyboard writing was very innovative. And that's, I find often with women composers. It's as if they didn't have to fit in a box. They were not fighting for a job or anything. So they felt that they could write what they wanted. So very often you find the way of writing melodic, harmonic, very different. It's surprising. It's experimental. It's very innovative. Now, because of her stature as a performance artist, because of her salon, she was in a perfect place to meet lots of interesting people. So she developed a strong web of connections with some of the most notable composers of the time, like Beethoven, Cherubini, Chopin, Rossini, John Field, Hummel, who both Field and Hummel dedicated compositions to her. So when I started looking at her a year and a half ago, there was hardly anything, I was going to say readable. You know what I mean? It was first editions, and I thought, okay, this is great, but we can't use it because it's hard to read. Now things are coming out. And I want to show you the mazurka that's in the level 3 list. So it's from a book called 24 Mazurka or National Polish Dances, published in 1826. Now, her mazurka, we know the Chopin's mazurka. Her mazurkas represent one of the first attempts at the stylization of the dance. And it's the largest collection of mazurkas before Chopin's. So the musical form is based on stylized folk dances in triple meter, usually at a lively tempo, but some, like this one, are slower, more moderate tempo. So it's characterized by strong accents, unsystematically placed on the second or third beats, like in Chopin's mazurka. So this one, like I said, is at level 3. It's slower. Now I find that many more of her mazurkas deserve to be included in piano syllabi. So I mean, that's the next step. We're working on it. So that's the mazurka. It's in C major. So that's what it would sound on the harpsichord. And I played it on this because the harpsichord, I learned, kept being played very late in Poland and in Russia. And this is not, well, it's working to a certain point. And apparently Chopin had some of his pieces performed on the harpsichord at the time also. And Wanda Landowska was playing Chopin on the harpsichord in the 20th century. So now the piano. So that's a lovely piece. And well, it's perfect example to use to teach a dance. in 3. The strong, weak, weak, strong, weak, weak, that's so important. And I find that many students, I have to tell them this, okay, 3 beats, strong, weak, weak. 4 beats, strong beats are 1 and 3. And it's so important for the character of the music. So dance in 3/4. The phrasing, 4 bars. The first antécédent, 2 + 2, and then 2 + 2, and then 4. The analysis of the shaping of the phrases, the direction of the melodic line, with the nuance, crescendo, diminuendo. Where are you going? Where's the climax of that phrase? The balance between the melody of the right hand and the accompaniment of the left hand, with the chords again, chord inversions. It's a good piece to talk about, to include a bit of theory. Chord inversions, dominant 7th chord, the color of the dominant 7th chord, what it creates in terms of emotions, the modulations also, and show the patterns. 9 to 11 compared to 13 to 15. Now, I looked on YouTube, and there's many video performances of that mazurka. There's also, I would show the students, I would send them a clip of dances. I found 2 mazurka del Gatto Pardo. That's 1 minute 50 seconds. That works well. Now, to show you how quickly things are happening with pieces, repertoire by women composers. There's many now on IMSLP, Petrucci Music Library. She has 4 preludes there, 6 minuets, 20 exercises and preludes, 18 dances that were added in the fall of 2021. So every month now, there are more coming out, being made available. I also want to mention, I had a student last week who really surprised me, an adult student, and he was, I sent him on YouTube to listen to a few things, and he kept exploring, and he came back to me last week saying that he had found a Nocturne in A-flat by Maria Simanovska, and he just was so flabbergasted. He just loved it. He said, I want to learn this one. It's about, I would say, level 7, and it is beautiful. Originally, it was written for 3 hands. On YouTube, there's a version, it's like what you were saying earlier, Eleanor. It looks like it was a violin accompaniment. So somebody would play on top here, a few notes, but it could be played independently from that voice. And it's just beautiful. The other one that I want to mention is Ignacio Sancho. Now, Ignacio Sancho was a slave, and he was born in a slave ship. He was given at 2 years old to 3 sisters living in Greenwich, England, and his life is like, it's unbelievable. He worked for them many years, and after many years, he ran away to a neighbor house. It was in the country, and he ran away to the house of the Duke and Duchess of Montague, who had a summer residence nearby, and who were frequent guests of the 3 sisters. And the Duke had been very impressed by Ignacio's intellect and frankness, and he was a nice guy, obviously, and he had encouraged him to read and write, and would lend him books. And so finally he escaped, and he ran to their house. And it seems like the Duke and his wife had a history of helping slaves to emancipate and helping them to start a new life. So he was not an isolated case. So anyway, they hired him as a valet, as a free man, and they supervised his education that included music lessons. So this led him to a very creative career. He wrote poetry, plays, essays, and he composed instrumental pieces and songs. And in parallel to his artistic career, he also had a shop, which became a meeting place for artists, musicians, writers, and politicians. So he was also, an important figure in the British abolitionist movement. A member of London's artistic and literary circles as political. So in short, he became part of the elite. And he's the first person of African origin known to have voted in Britain. So there's apparently 62 known compositions printed by him, printed between 1767, 1779. So we're definitely talking harpsichord here. If you want to explore more, we're talking the 12 country dances, but there's also minuets on Petrucci. Now, the British country dances, they were, if you look at the screen there, at the bottom, you have the explanations of how it is danced, and he does that for everyone. So it's a social dance for several couples, and we're talking dances of the upper classes here. The step work is kind of simple and less formal than the minuet would be. All the titles are in French, and I was intrigued by that. And it turns out that the Duke was a Francophile, and he really admired the French court, imitating, their style, their way of life, the food. And his main house was called Broughton House, and it was called the English Versailles. So, and that's where Sancho lived for many years. And I found on YouTube, totally by accident, there's a clip, a video called "Can You Learn the Steps to This 18th Century Dance?" And it's actually filmed in Broughton House. So I was kind of impressed to see the decor, thinking, oh my God, that's where Sancho lived. So this is part of the 12 country dances, and it's called Les Contes des Fées. So it basically story tales, fairy tales. And I think, well, I'll play it first and you'll see. So this is listed at level 1. And it's a very, I think it would be a very interesting piece for a child. First, there's the connection with fairy tales. And then there's also the connection. It's supposed to be a rigadoon. So you see the instruction for the dance. So it's defined, the definition is a lively, jumping, quick step for two couples, usually in rapid duple meter. Again, originally a sprightly 17th century French folk dance. So the inspiration of the connection with France. It became popular as a court dance. Its hopping steps were adopted by the French and English courts, and it remains fashionable throughout the 18th century. So in duple meter, regular phrases, mostly 8. Rhythmically, it's simple. you get the quarter note and then the eighth notes, and it falls well under the hand, you know, the pattern, the chords, stepwise, chord. Also, if you're interested to look more into his works, the country dances, there's many included in the syllabus from level 1 to 4, and there's also 5 minuets, 1 to 4 also. On YouTube, again, I would send the students to watch a rigodon. There's one by a group called La Baladine that's really cute and fun. So again, anything to make it more concrete, you know? Yeah.
So some of the problems in transcribing, seeing some of these manuscripts, something that was interesting that I didn't realize, on the Matai manuscript, there was a note written on the cover, Gaspero Sporgi. So who is Gaspero Sporgi? So we looked him up. He's another composer. And the handwriting was the same in his manuscripts as in Matai's. So was Matai for real, or where did this come from? So I started doing some research, and composers actually used copyists for the most part. So we always think composers wrote down their own music, but actually what they did was they hired a copyist who would transcribe as they were playing, would write down what they were playing. So of course, copyists come in varying degrees of quality. So good copyists are meticulous and put in all the all the details. But when you go through some of these manuscripts, the phrase slurs, articulation is inconsistent. Dynamics are inconsistent. There are even wrong notes. Sometimes you're looking at parallel sections where the music is obviously the same, and all of a sudden there's a note in there and you're going, well, it makes no sense. It must be a wrong note. So those are just some of the challenges. Then why only a first edition? Why did this music not survive? So what happens in the publishing world is when you sign on with a publisher, if the work doesn't sell, they delist you, and now you've lost it. You no longer have rights to your own compositions. But in order for the music to sell, it requires promotion. So if the publisher doesn't promote you, you don't sell enough copies, and then the work is delisted. So perhaps that's why so many of these pieces only existed in first editions, because they were written by women and were probably not promoted. Another problem with some of the current editions that are out there, there are a lot of editorial markings. And as somebody who publishes in the Women Composer Series, I've made sure to put in grayscale any markings that were not in the original score. Fingering is also highly personal. So that's mentioned as well, that the fingering, the composers for the most part did not include fingering. So that is editorial. But it's very, very important when you're looking at modern editions and you see Baroque and classical music with a lot of dynamics and slurs, phrasing marked in. That's not what the composer put in there. So if you're looking for an authentic interpretation, you may have to scratch out some of those markings. So it's important to understand what the source of these works is. Then there are also arrangements of more difficult works. So yes, for example, the Walpurgis is an arrangement of a work from her opera. However, when we take works today and arrange them, it's like arranging Clair de Lune or arranging Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata into something easy. It's fun, it's recreational, but it's not serious music. You can't go into an exam and play a simplified version of the Moonlight Sonata, or you can't go into a music festival, Kiwanis Music Festival, and play a simplified version of a Moonlight Sonata. So, one just has to be careful when choosing the music. Cecile, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I totally agree. As a teacher, for me, it's important to know exactly what the composer wrote, what comes from the composers. The articulations, you know, is sometimes, even in Baroque, I'm thinking Gambarini, she puts some articulations herself. So to know what the composer wrote and then what comes from the editor. I mean, sometimes, yes, it's interesting to look at different editions. Sometimes there are good ideas, but you know that they're suggestions. You can take them as suggestions.
Absolutely.
And you make sure that, yes, we have a great respect for the text now these days. So you make sure that you follow the intentions of the composers, and then you know the style, you know the characteristics of, let's say, Baroque style versus Mozart, classical style, and Chopin. You won't play Mozart the same way you play Chopin. The articulations, the sounds are different. So to me, it's very important to follow, to know what the composer wrote and what has been added. And there's so much material now. There's no reason, you know, it's easy to find.
Exactly. And I mean, I think that's why Bartok, for example, his music, he puts in so many details, because by the time we reached the 20th century, composers started to realize, oh dear, pianists are taking all kinds of liberties here. So if I want my music played the way I want it played 200 years from now, I better put in all those details so that nobody can second guess what my intentions actually were.
Yeah.
Anyway, Cecile and I will be back on May the 6th with early romantic repertoire from the lower grades. And we're also going to be doing a presentation at the ORMTA conference coming up in July in Kingston, Ontario. So we'd love to meet you.
Okay, great. Thanks, both of you. This was really great just to get to geek out with the two of you like this in all of these ways. You know, this music, we work with our students so hard on it, trying to impress upon them what the style is, what kind of considerations you need to use when you're putting it, when you're performing it. And it's, you know, it's really like stepping back into the museum with them. And so this is the kind of information that we crave as teachers and that we want to pass on to our students. And thank you both for all of the information today, you know, the wealth of information, and also the demonstrations that I have to say, I'm sure all of us feel the same way, that your audio is broadcasting just brilliantly. We can hear all of the nuance and all of that. So thanks for putting time into the tech and giving us the performances so that you bring the music to life. And we look forward to more on May 6th. You know, I'm not seeing any questions. I think you're both working in so much detail that, you know, it's when we're adjudicating, let's say I'm doing some adjudicating right now at a festival online, and you just see those certain performances where you can just put your pencil down or stop typing and just sit and listen and watch and enjoy. And that's really what we're doing. I think that's why we're not seeing many questions here at all today. You're just filling in the blanks for us beautifully and doing such a great job. We all love it. And that's what the questions are. Someone's just asking here, the May 6th webinar feature women composers of the Romantic period as well. That's exactly the intention, I think, Catherine. It's a good question. Thanks for clarifying that.
The early Romantic period.
Early Romantic period.
So much more from that era by women. So we've decided to split it into two groups.
Right. And maybe what I'll do, if I can just quickly here, you're all going to get the registration links in your inbox in time, but I don't believe I was able to slip that one in because I just created it yesterday. I think I'm just going to put this in the chat box. If anyone wants to register for that webinar now so they don't forget, I'm just going to throw it in the chat box. There you go. Click on that quickly before the end of the webinar here, and you can use that to register to see Cecile and Eleanor on May 6th. So thanks again, both of you. It's been an hour and a half. You'll all get a replay link, and thanks to all for joining us, even those that are watching this later.
Well, Derek, thank you so much for inviting us to do that. We really had a great time preparing for that webinar.
We actually have too much fun, I think, preparing.
And it shows. We really appreciate it. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great week.
Bye.
And I'll see you Friday webinar 2 weeks from now. Have a good Easter.
Take care.